I'd like to tell a little story about healing I experienced in my life. This is some 20 years ago. I was a seminarian at the time, in my early 20s, just a couple years in seminary. And I went to this summer program for spirituality out in Omaha, Nebraska, of all places. And I was with a group of about 60 seminarians there from all around the country. I had a spiritual director, and at one point, the spiritual director recommended that I go to this prayer group that was there at the program, and it was a healing prayer group. I don't remember actually what I asked them to pray over me about. It was some kind of healing, but they laid hands on me, they prayed, and I felt this intense feeling of relief and freedom and peace in my mind and body and soul. Well, anyway, that happened, and there was another seminarian there in the prayer group at the time. I remember him. He was from Iowa, and he was a really tall guy. He was a former Division I cross-country athlete, so super fast, great runner. And at the time, he had some kind of intense knee pain. I don't know if he had an ACL or some other problem with his knee, but it kept him from running, and he was in great pain. So the prayer team there, the healing prayer team, prayed over him, and they asked me to put my hand on his knee. So I put my hand on his knee, everyone prayed, and then afterwards, his knee pain was gone. Well, how about that? So I will be honest with you, I'm skeptical. I'm still somewhat skeptical. There's a kind of doubtfulness in my heart about this kind of thing. But I can't deny that God has been healing me, and he's healing me of my doubt, and he's calling me to exercise my own giftedness. In some way, I'm called to be a doctor of souls, a healer as a priest. So today is our fourth week of this series for Lent. It's all about healing. I'm fine, and neither are you. The idea is that we all have wounds. We all have wounds, whether they're relational, spiritual, emotional, mental, or physical. We can't go through life without having bumps and bruises. So I think if you categorize different kinds of hurts, you can put them in two different kind of categories. There are wounds of omission, first of all. Well, these are hurts that result from us being denied something. Perhaps you were denied respect, or you were denied misunderstanding. It was very hurtful. Or you were denied when you were a kid proper discipline and boundaries, and that led to a lot of bad things. Or perhaps you were denied love and care and support in your household growing up. Those are wounds of omission. We tend to deny that we have those things. Then there are wounds of commission. In other words, things that directly happen to us, whether they were intentional or unintentional. And this includes trauma. This includes any kind of traumatic thing that could have happened to us. And I just read this week, did you know that neuroscience teaches us that our brains store memories of trauma? Every single cell, actually, in our whole body has some kind of memory of hurts and pains and wounds. And that doesn't go away unless we seek out healing. Whether we know it or not, we can act out of that woundedness. Maybe at a certain point we're triggered by something, we realize it, but unconsciously, subconsciously, in our speech, our action, our words, that hurt and pain is still there. And it's just the case that time doesn't heal all wounds. We have to intentionally seek out healing. And it's not just about us, because hurt people, and we're all hurt. We don't want to hurt the people around us. Heal people, heal people. We want to live the most successful and impactful life that God wants us to live, then we're going to seek out healing. Healing is not soft. It's something tough. So in the past few weeks, we've looked at 3 different simple steps to take for healing. And we're going very slow because this is such a difficult topic. The first step, we said, is simply be open. Be open to the fact we need healing. Be open to the fact we have a choice to rely on God and his grace, because he is the ultimate healer, or to try to just live it on our own without God. Be open. Second step is to listen to Jesus. Jesus is the divine physician, and he will tell us what needs to be healed in us and how it can come about. Then the third step, which we said last week, the most difficult step of all, is to actually enter the wound, to actually go there, to confront the wound. But remember, we don't do that on our own. We do it with Jesus in the context of his love and care for us. But today we're going to look at another step, and this step is for skeptics. So you know who you are. Maybe you're like me. I can totally empathize with you. You don't believe in this kind of thing, and maybe you struggle with doubt, honestly, with doubt in God. And I'm glad that you're here. If you're that person, perhaps this step is for you today, because that power of healing is not just the fairy tale. It's not just something that happened in Jesus' own lifetime and those stories in the Bible, but it's for us here and now. So what's that step to take? We'll look briefly at today's gospel reading. The gospel is from John chapter 9, and it's a powerful miracle story, a healing story. It picks up like this. As Jesus passed by, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" So there's not much context here except the fact Jesus and his followers are passing by this blind man. He's blind from birth. He's a beggar, we later hear. And Jesus must have known him, or his disciples knew that he was blind from birth. They may have known him previously some way. That's all we know here. But notice the disciples' question they asked. What, did he sin or his parents? That was the common thinking, that somebody had to have done something wrong. If you had a physical ailment, if you had any kind of infirmity, it was the result of somebody doing something bad. It was a punishment from God. And you may wonder, well, how could someone who was born blind be punished? Did they do something bad in their mother's womb? Well, actually, I read this sort of funny thing. Some of the ancient rabbis taught that a baby in the mother's womb could actually sin if, for example, they went to a pagan temple and worshiped false gods. So that seems kind of really ridiculous thinking to us. But here's the thing. We can think along the same lines. All of us can think in similar ways. So say you have a hurt, you have a pain, and in the back of your mind you're thinking, I deserved it. I deserved it because I did this wicked thing. I did this bad thing. God's punishing me. And we all can tend to think that way from time to time. So say you had a hurt because at one time in your youth, you opened yourself up to someone. You revealed your heart. You had an intense relationship with someone, and you were hurt. You were blown off, or you were made fun of. And the result is that you closed yourself off. I remember, this could be with anything, including sports. So I remember being in elementary school in Little League. And I don't know who said it. I think I hear a lot of voices saying, you were a terrible Little Leaguer. And the result was I gave up on ever playing baseball again. You know, and we can take these messages from our childhood and then we reinforce them by our own choices time and time and time again. And part of it is a defense mechanism. We're defending our hearts and our minds from stuff that's bad. But when we do that, we can also unintentionally block out what's good. We can block out God's love, God's forgiveness, God's grace. It's not our fault. It's the fault of being in a broken and fallen world. It's original sin, not our own personal sin. So anyway, here's Jesus' response to the disciples' question. Jesus says, neither he nor his parents sinned. It is so that the works of God might be made visible through him. So Jesus dismisses that whole question. He says, they didn't sin. the man born blind or his parents, it was this hurt, this wound, is so that God's glory may be revealed through him. So in other words, Jesus knows exactly what's going to happen. He knows exactly what he's going to do. It's going to show God's glory. It's going to reveal who Jesus is, that he was sent from God, that he is the Son of God. Oh, in that particular culture, at that particular time, healing of blindness was unheard of. You read all the stories in the Old Testament, in the Hebrew Bible, there are very, very few stories about healing of blind people, and absolutely no stories about healing of a blind person from birth. That was never heard of. And so this was considered something that would usher along the coming of the Messiah. And the prophet Isaiah, for example, hundreds of years before Jesus, the prophet speaks of the Messiah coming, accompanied by the eyes of the blind being opened. This was considered something extraordinary that people were anticipating, that specific healing of a blind person. So we don't have that same kind of culture today. However, here's where we're similar today. If we experience something, we tend to believe it's true. We're skeptical, but all of us, if we tend to experience something, we tend to believe it's true. Our truth, your truth, my truth, tends to come from seeing it and experiencing it. That's just how things are. And so all these surveys say that younger generation, Gen Z, is so rejecting religion and not believing in God and things. And yet, a few weeks ago, in a little town in Kentucky, there was this outpouring of God's love with a group of young people in a little college town, Ashbury. You may have heard of the Ashbury Revival. Well, that's not far from where my mother grew up in Kentucky, actually. And there, a group of young people prayed continuously, praised God, and experienced healing in extraordinary ways. And it seems so authentic because it's experienced. So if you are a doubter, if you're a skeptic, and if you actually experienced healing in some way, or a loved one did, you would probably tend to believe. You'd probably tend to overcome that doubt and that skepticism. So here's what happens simply in the story. Very simply, when Jesus had said this, he spat on the ground and made clay with the saliva and smeared the clay on his eyes and said to him, "Go, wash in the pool of Siloam," which means sent. So he went and washed and came back able to see. So that's it. That's the miracle that has occurred, and it may seem strange. Why did Jesus spit on the ground? Why did he rub his finger and make clay out of the saliva? And why did he put it on the eyes of this man born blind? It seems very weird and strange. Well, see, the thing about healing is that it comes in all different shapes and sizes. It's unique to your woundedness. Just as the doctor diagnoses a treatment that's unique to every single one of us, we are sick and go to the doctor, so the healing that God pours out and provides for us is going to be unique to our own situation. Now, in John's gospel, there's more, because there's, in John's gospel, layers of symbolism here. So there's something symbolic here. Where in the Bible is there a story about clay and mud from the ground? The book of Genesis. We heard that a few weeks ago. God creating Adam out of the dust and dirt of the earth. Well, that is echoed here, because Jesus, who is God, who is there at the creation of the whole earth, of human beings, he is now recreating this man. He is recreating him, bringing him life and health and wholeness. Jesus, who is the Son of God, who is the light of the world, he's recreating him. But wait, there's even more. You see, at this point, this man born blind has done nothing. He's been entirely passive. If you read some of the other stories of healing in the Gospels, there's always an action step with the people being healed. there's always a dialogue, there's always a coming to faith, there's always something that they do. So for example, the synagogue official whose child is on their deathbed, he goes and begs with Jesus desperately. The woman with the hemorrhage, she's suffering. She grabs onto Jesus' cloak. And then there's the Canaanite woman whose daughter is sick. She pleads with Jesus. She banters with him back and forth. She perseveres. My point is there's always an action step. And so Jesus says here to the man born blind, go and wash. And he does so, and he's healed. That's our participation as well, my friends. You see, we have a choice to make to participate in our own healing. Because Jesus doesn't just want to recreate us, he wants us to be co-creators with him in the process of healing in the world. It's not just about us. So the story, in short, happens like this. This man born blind, he's healed, but then Jesus steps away, and the man hasn't actually seen the person healing him. Read the rest of John chapter 9 when you go home today. It's a kind of trial. Did this man actually receive the healing? Well, there's different people brought onto the stage, so to speak, or the trial. First is his neighbors, his parents, and then the religious authorities drag himself in the temple. And they are blind because they are envious and hating Jesus. They refuse to believe that the miracle occurred. And the man just says, well, he must be a prophet, and he refuses to change his testimony. So they throw him out of the temple. Here's what happens at the end of the story. When Jesus heard that they had thrown him out, he found him and said, do you believe in the Son of Man? He answered and said, who is he, sir, that I may believe in him? Remember, the man born blind has not yet seen who healed him. So now he sees Jesus in front of him, and he says, who is he that I may believe in him? Jesus is leading him along. He has taken the action step, and then Jesus fully reveals himself to him. He says this, you have seen him, the one speaking with you is he. He said, I do believe, Lord, and he worshiped him. So this man born blind went from not knowing Jesus at all, who he was, to thinking he's a prophet, to now becoming a Christ follower. If you experience healing, you're going to not just believe in your head, you're going to believe in your heart. You're going to give your life to God if you experience that. This man experienced all this in just a couple hours. So what do we take from this today? What's our action step today? Jesus is ultimately the healer. It's in a relationship with him. And no matter how that healing comes about, no matter what that healing is, it's about that relationship with he who is the divine physician. And so just as the man born blind had an action step, go and wash, so you and I have an action step. So you fill in the blank today. Go and blank. What is that for you? Maybe it's go and forgive. Maybe it's go and go to confession because your sin is self-inflicted, or your wound, your hurt is self-inflicted. Go receive forgiveness and confession. Maybe it's go to our healing mass this afternoon. Maybe it's go and open up with your small group. Maybe it's go to a therapist or a counselor. Maybe it's go and reconcile with another person. You see, God wants to pour out healing upon us. He desires that we may be whole and healed, and he wants us to be part of it, to be partners with him. And it's not about us, because bottom line, hurt people hurt people. But whole people, heal people, heal people. Amen.